Freddy, you really are a true jack of all trades. Not only are you a maniacal dream demon, but you're also a melty skeleton man, a phallic giant snake, a surgeon, a nurse, a waiter, and a bus driver. But what you most certainly are not is consistent with your look. I mean, you range from hidden in the shadows and slimy to just plain silly. I mean, seriously, how did we go from this to this? What's happening, my fellow ghouls and ghoulettes, and welcome to a nightmare-filled episode of Cosplay Chris as we look at the evolution of Freddy Krueger throughout his cinematic run. Stay tuned. Now, first things first, I just want to do a bit of housekeeping. We're going to be covering Freddy's evolution throughout his live-action cinematic run. So no appearances in cartoons like Scary Terry from Rick and Morty. But with that being said, I do want to give some honorable mentions. The first honorable mention goes to Freddys Nightmares, the syndicated television series in the late 80s where Freddy was essentially hosting an anthology series much in the same vein as the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt, Alfred Hitchcock. Now, the look of Freddy in Freddy's Nightmares was a mixture of the Part 4 makeup and wardrobe and the Part 5 makeup and wardrobe. It was taking place around the times of wrapping production on Part 4 and then also during production and after production of Part 5, The Dream Child. Now, in terms of the gloves, it was a mixture of all of the hero gloves used throughout Part 5 and also a little appearance of the hero glove from Nightmare on Elm Street 4. Secondly, and this is a doozy and I will leave the link down below to the footage, you've just got to check it out. Robert Englund's appearance on a Japanese variety show back in the late 80s. I've been trying to pinpoint the exact date for this. It seems around the 1989-1990 mark. It's an absolute hoot. I'm going to attempt to pronounce the name of the variety show. Kato-chan Ken-chan Goki-gen. Try saying that 20 times. But seriously, when I say you gotta check out this footage, you've gotta check out this footage. Look at this. What the hell? Thirdly, the Goldbergs. So Robert made an appearance on the TV show The Goldbergs back in 2018, utilizing the makeup done by Robert Kurtzman, who made the makeup for Robert when he was doing his final appearances as Freddy at some conventions overseas. So they had repurposed this makeup for Robert to wear in an episode of The Goldbergs where we see Robert back in full Freddy attire, different looking glove, different looking makeup, you know, pretty standard looking fedora, not the greatest looking sweater. It was still cool to see Robert back nonetheless as Freddy Krueger. And finally, Mr. Dave McRae as Freddy Krueger in the upcoming fan film Dylan's New Nightmare that is a direct sequel to Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I'm very excited about this. I'm so stoked for Dave and he looks menacing and amazing as Freddy Krueger. So again, this is a direct sequel to Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Cecil Laird, the director, also got Miko Hughes back. So this is going to be coming out this year in 2023. Very excited for that. All right, all the honorable mentions, all the housekeeping out of the way. Pop yourself some Hypnosil, take a seat, relax, and let's get to it. So here we go, the 1984 Nightmare on Elm Street film, the first cab off the rank in terms of the first look of Freddy, and in my opinion, it's the best look. He's dark, he's gritty, he's slimy. If you haven't seen my video on how Wes Craven designed Freddy, I will leave the link down below. But essentially, when it came to designing Krueger, the fedora was based off an old drunk that scared the shit out of Craven when he was a kid. Now, at one point during a makeup test, they were going to be using a Paperboy's hat. Craven got a bit of cold feet, but Robert Englund stepped in and said, "No, Wes, you have to use the fedora." And then the fedora became an iconic trademark to Freddy, much like the fedora became an iconic trademark to Indiana Jones. Now, when it came to the burn makeup, Craven wanted something that wasn't a mask. He wanted a mask of scar tissue, essentially, where you can see the personality of this character shining through that awesome makeup. in comes David Miller, fresh off Thriller with Michael Jackson, who designed this beautifully intricate makeup that was layered, that had a base layer of muscle and the burnt flesh on top of it, so it all moved individually. Now, unfortunately, you can't see all the intricacies of this because of how the film is lit. Nonetheless, it's still a beautiful look, and I just love that gnarly charred ear with a hole through it. Now, when it came to the sweater, this is such a unique looking sweater. There are no green stripes adorned on the sleeves. And I honestly thought they should have kept that throughout the entire series. I don't know why there was a change. I think when it came to Elm Street 2, that's a Jack Shoulder or a Robert Shea decision. But here's a photo of the screen-used sweater, and you can see the tag. It was made by a place in LA called Albion Knit, which is really cool. Now, when it came to the glove, Craven wanted something completely different that wasn't a chainsaw, a machete, a butcher's knife. He wanted something that this character had made himself. So it was the beautiful razor glove, just like mine, as you can see right there from the amazing Tony Gill. The glove itself was made from Type M copper pipe, a charred brass backplate, brass rivets, adorned with Case XX P210 tomato knives with the handles removed, turned upside down and brazed onto that Type N copper pipe. The whole armature was then mounted onto a Dirty Workers trucker glove. Now, the going rumor is that it was either a Wells Lamont brand glove or a Stanley brand glove. I'm leaning more towards the Stanley brand just because of how different the Wells Lamont can look to the Stanley glove, but I'm just seriously geeking out about gloves at this point, and I'm going to be doing that throughout this video. Now, you'll also notice when I'm mentioning all the different looks of Freddy, I'm not going to really touch on the pants and boots because they're just so stock standard. The going brand that Robert loved when it came to the pants and the boots were Dickies brand. He also loved his Red Wing boots. And there you go, the first cab off the rank in terms of the look of Freddy Krueger, or in this case, Fred Krueger. It's my personal favorite. With that being said, moving on to Freddy's Revenge. So Nightmare on Elm Street 1 was a huge hit, and head of distribution for New Line came into Bob Shea and said, we need a sequel right now. So they got to work so quick on this. The pre-production was like that, so much so they didn't initially hire Robert Englund. His agent apparently wanted more money, so they started Elm Street 2 Freddy's Revenge with a double, with a stand-in. And you can see right here the only shot of the stand-in, and you can see why there's only one shot of the stand-in. He looks awful. No one can play Freddy like Robert. Bob Shea had obviously realized this. Jack Shoulder, the director, had realized this. They hired Robert and they got to work doing the makeup. And in comes Kevin Yeager, who replaced David Miller, who did something so terrifying with this makeup. It's a beautiful makeup. It's so thin to look at, but at the same time completely hides Robert's face. Kevin Yeager wanted more of a male witch look to Freddy in Elm Street 2. You've got the sunken eyes, the hook nose, you've got the bone structure on the temples, the wetness, and those beautiful blaring red contact lenses that Robert wears is such a nice touch. We've got a different looking fedora. Apparently the base hat was actually a cowboy hat, and you can kind of see that with the high crown and whatnot and the sharpness of it. Very different to the original gangster looking fedora that Freddy wore in the first Nightmare on Elm Street. Now the sweater differs very much from the first one. We now have green stripes adorned on those sleeves. I don't know why it was changed. I really want to find out actually. Again, I don't know if it was a Jack Shoulder decision or Robert Shea decision, but either way, this is now the sweater design we're going to be sticking with from here on out. When it came to the glove, it's actually the same glove used in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, but this time around, the glove had been battered around a bit, the blades had been blunted a lot, dinged, marred, everything. The color had completely been stripped off the glove. It no longer had that dark brown charred look to it. It's more of a nice base caramel, or in some cases, caramel. The red ball on the pull string had been ripped off, and I, for the longest time when I started building gloves, initially thought it was a completely different glove. They just tried to build something similar to the part 1. And at a couple of points during the film, you can see Robert wearing old man dress shoes. And even in behind the scenes photos, he's like wearing dress shoes that, you know, Jimmy would take Sally out to the prom in.
Hello, Freddy.
Now we also get a different looking glove towards the end of the film with the blades essentially coming out of the hands, and this was a foam latex glove that Kevin Yeager built. He only made one. He actually posted a photo of it a couple of years ago, which is really cool to see. It's still held up somewhat. As you guys know, with foam latex, over time it will eventually break down if it's not kept properly. Now when it comes to the looks, it's part 1 and part 2 for me. It's so different but so terrifying at the same time. The way Freddy is lit in part 2 is just absolutely beautiful with all that glistening, oozing sores of the burns. It's just beautiful. Kevin Yeager, David Miller, they did an incredible job. But moving on to Dream Warriors, this is usually the Freddy we all think about when we think of Freddy Krueger. So for Dream Warriors, Kevin Yeager returned to do the makeup for Robert Englund, but Robert Shea wanted the makeup to appear as if Freddy had started to heal. He had started to form back into the look of Robert Englund. And it's funny hearing this. When I was a kid, I always thought the same thing. Starting from part 1 to part 6, Freddys Dead, I always thought the makeup had this continuity where Freddy was slowly healing, with those big open wounds from the first Nightmare on Elm Street were now healed by the 6th Nightmare on Elm Street. But no, it was just one really good makeup, one not so good makeup. And I can totally see it. The makeup looks so thin on Robert in part 3. You can see more of Robert in this Freddy than any other Freddy design. The sweater has stayed relatively the same, except the greens and the reds are a lot more richer, deeper this time around. Pretty much the same weathering going on, and we'll talk about how the weathering goes later on in the video. But when it came to the glove, it's a brand new glove. I actually really like this glove. I don't feel the part 3 glove gets enough love. Now, a lot of people think that the glove from part 1 and 2 was stolen after production wrapped on part 2, Freddy's Revenge. This is not exactly the case. That glove was actually used as reference to build the part 3 glove by prop builder Scott Nesselroe. For some reason, he spray painted the original hero glove a brownish black. I don't know why, but he kind of transferred that look onto the part 3 glove because the part 3 glove does have spray paint on it. It was then after that that the glove mysteriously disappeared, but you can also see the original glove in a promo trailer for Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And then after that, the glove vanished for a very long time until it was discovered back in 2009. It was actually sold on an auction site as a prototype glove for Nightmare on Elm Street 5. It sold for $600. Collector Mike Becker then rang up the auction house and got the glove back from the original buyer and then had the glove for a while. The glove now resides in a pop culture museum in Seattle, right next to the Screen Use Part 1 sweater, which is very cool. How's that for a reunion? But anyway, like I said, this is the Freddy we usually think about when we think of Freddy Krueger. It's always Dream Warriors or Dream Master. I think because this was the hype of Freddy being popular with the MTV generation Freddy look going on. You got all the cardboard cutouts utilizing the Part 3 promo stills. The fedora seems to get a lot smaller in Part 3 and Part 4, but overall it is a really decent look for Freddy Krueger. And Robert seems to emote a lot more in this makeup, I guess because it was so thin, but again, you can tell it is Robert under that makeup as opposed to the rest of the Freddy Krueger makeups. With that being said, moving on to the Dream Master. There isn't much to say about the look of the Dream Master makeup, sweater, hat. It's pretty much the same as part 3. Not as much weathering on the sweater. The colors have gone back to a much more vibrant red and green. And when it comes to the makeup, it's essentially like the part 3 makeup, just bulked up and sharpened a little bit. Now, Kevin Yeager did generate these prosthetics once again, but this time makeup artist Howard Berger and Bill Forsh stepped in to do the makeup on Robert and his stunt doubles. Now, when it came to the glove, a completely new glove was utilized, and this time, this is where they started using the Wells Lamont 1178 and Trucker Special leather gloves, as you can see right here. Also, the preferred glove of Tim the Toolman Taylor. Now, this glove is gnarly dirty. It has spray paint, solder spills, everything going for it. There are a couple of variations made. We have obviously the Hero, we have the Diner glove, the Apple glove, the Dojo glove, and of course the Stunt gloves. Again, not much really else to say. It's very similar to the part 3, but the makeup is a lot more bulked out, a lot more sharper. But to me, the part 3 and part 4 is what I always remember as a kid when I think Freddy Krueger. Okay, now we're moving into odd territory, ghouls and ghoulettes. Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. This is where the franchise started to take a massive nosedive, especially when it came to the makeup. Now, Bob Shaye and director Stephen Hopkins wanted Freddy to appear a lot more older and a lot more weathered. A lot of drooping skin. David Miller from the first Nightmare on Elm Street came back to do the makeup, and this is what we got. With a fedora very similar to the part 3 and part 4 fedoras, and a sweater that has just been very sloppily cut and weathered. I wouldn't even call it weathered. There's not much weathering going on right here. But when it came to that makeup, and I've seen many interviews with some makeup artists, the way it was lit, it just looks like rubber. You can definitely tell it's foam latex, whereas you can use foam latex and not have it look like foam latex, depending how you light it. Freddy definitely does look older and weathered and a lot more saggier in some shots. And I do love in certain scenes how his eyes look, just especially when you're utilizing Robert Englund's beady eyes and how he uses them. Now, when it came to the gloves for part 5 and 6 were built by Ryan Effner, who was actually a smoke technician on A Nightmare on Elm Street 4. Now, what a promotion that is, from pumping out smoke to pumping out gloves. There are so many gloves built for part 5, I can't keep up. I'm sure someone in the comments section will know. So many part 5 gloves, different like A, B, C, D, E, F, G hero gloves have popped up on auction sites. There's always a part 5 glove in circulation doing the rounds on auction sites or private collectors. We obviously have our stunt gloves, and this is where the backplate has the folds in it. We still have the solder spills. The part 5 is a pretty plain looking glove. I still dig it. I still think it doesn't get much love, much like the part 3 glove, but it's very similar to the part 6 hero gloves because we have the same builder, Ryan Effner, doing part 5 and part 6. But overall, this is a very forgettable look for Freddy, but nonetheless, it's part of the evolution. Freddys Dead, The Final Nightmare. A film, please forgive me, I hold very near and dear to my heart. It was the first Nightmare on Elm Street film that I had ever watched. So I did my viewing of the Nightmare on Elm Street series in reverse. I started with part 6 and finished on part 1. I think that's the best way to do it. Your expectations are right down here and you end on a massive high. But in terms of the look of Freddy, it is pretty much the same as the part 5 looking Freddy. This time around, the makeup had been refined a little bit more, didn't look as rubbery. There are some gloss points with the wounds and stuff like that. David Miller did generate these prosthetics once again, but he did not do the application. He was doing other things for the film. We had the legendary and late great John Carl Buechler doing some of the prosthetics for some scenes in the film. But overall, this, again, much like the part 5 Freddy, is a very plain looking Freddy, but I still love it because I have nostalgia goggles and I'm more than happy to admit that. Now, when it comes to the fedora, Freddy actually wears a Stenson brand temple fedora based off Indiana Jones. I've been doing my research, obviously, because I've been recently doing the part 6 Freddy Krueger bust, and I also wanted to try and source the same make and model hat. And from my research, I'm pretty sure it's bang on to the Stenson brand temple fedora, which is still readily available. You can buy them brand new to this day, which is incredible. The sweater has no weathering whatsoever. I kid you not. It is frayed here and there, but there is no soiling and staining going on. How do we start with such a dirty and manky looking sweater and end up with something where the costume designers, the props department, the weathering department just like, screw it, just fray it and put it on Robert. The hero glove in Freddy's Dead, I love. I absolutely love it. I have one on the way from Jameson Michael Knapp from Dark Dream Design. I've always loved it. Again, the first Freddy film I had ever seen, and seeing that glove, just how chunky, gnarly, and disgusting it is, you'd need a tetanus shot just by looking at it. There were some secondary hero gloves built for the film, as well as some stunt gloves. As always, there's always going to be stunt gloves, because Freddy has to, cop a beating, and then have that glove close to his face where the blades need to flex and stuff like that. But overall, again, very similar to the part 5. The makeup is refined a little bit more. We have a different looking fedora, but the plainest looking sweater, but a chunky and tank-like looking glove. And moving on to Wes Craven's New Nightmare, we have a very different looking Freddy, even though it's not Freddy. Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out in 1994, and Craven essentially came back to answer his critics for what had been the previous Elm Street films. So this included a brand new interpretation of Freddy that isn't exactly Freddy. This is an entity, a demonic presence that is utilizing the form of Freddy, the look of Freddy. And Freddy underwent a major redesign, honing back to that original notion that Craven had of the burnt, disfigured man walking down the street, the old drunk with the fedora and the trench coat. It's a look that I definitely dig and appreciate. I just feel he should have been a lot more weathered looking, especially when it came to that trench coat and that sweater. We start with an olive green fedora, which again, way too clean looking, but I still dig the olive green look to it. We have a really gnarly looking trench coat that is actually lined with Freddy's red and green trademark stripes. Now, when it came to the sweater, the colors are actually reversed this time around and different styles of knit on each stripe, which is really cool to see, especially when it's up close on auction sites. You can appreciate the work that has gone into this sweater. The makeup this time around was done once again by David Miller. Craven tried to get as many of the original cast and crew back as possible, including David Miller, the makeup artist. Now, Freddy isn't exactly burnt in this film. It's more or less just split skin exposing the muscle underneath. So a lot of anatomy going on there. I really dig it. It looks great. It really bulks out Robert's face. Robert actually wore some muscle padding, as you can see in some behind the scenes photos here of him trying on the bone claw, the sweater, and the trench coat and the fedora. He is bulked out a lot. Keep in mind, he did wear some shoulder pads in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, but I'm pretty sure that is for the scene where he extends his arms and he probably needed a bit of support. In my opinion, this look of Freddy would definitely seem a lot better if he'd been actually burnt and charred and just everything was literally hanging off him. Like the sweater was just about to unravel and fall apart off his body. The bone claw, I dig. I do love the full robotic claw that we see at the beginning of the film. The bone claw is really cool. Apparently, Robert said the thumb blade made it really clumsy to maneuver, and I can kind of see that. It'd probably be very top heavy for the thumb to maneuver with, but overall, it is a damn cool looking glove. A very cool design of Freddy, but something that I would love to have seen been a lot more dirtier. Freddy vs. Jason. I think I was the perfect age when Freddy vs. Jason came out. We had that early era of viral internet sensations going on, especially when it came to viral marketing campaigns for film. Freddy vs. Jason was right in the thick of it. So it had been nearly 10 years since Robert had portrayed Freddy. He came back as Freddy. We had Ken Kirzinger as Jason. These two titans of horror were about to clash, and that included a fresh look of Freddy, which included a makeup that is very reminiscent of the original Part 1 makeup with all those open wounds, but a lot more over the head. The makeup this time around was done by the late great Bill Tezarakis, who did a phenomenal job not only on the regular looking Freddy makeup, but also the demon makeup. I adore that demon makeup, even though we see it for one sequence in the film where Freddy really loses his shit, and it's great. It's essentially a blend of the original makeup with a new sculpt together, layered together with some exposed teeth, demonic looking contact lenses, and Robert looks like a beast in that makeup. The fedora, very similar to the Part 3, Part 4, Part 5 fedora, but a lot more weathering going on. Now, when it comes to the sweater, it's a lot more darker looking in terms of the reds and greens. Fun fact, I used to own a screen-used sweater from Freddy vs. Jason, most notably the scene where Jason cuts off Freddy's arm, he gets up, and right before it grows back, that's the sweater that I used to own. I owned it from 2012 to 2014 that included paperwork from New Line Cinema. It is now in the hands of a fellow collector friend of mine, Joe DeFino, who's taken very good care of it, and of course, before I sold it, I had to try it on. Robert's a tiny guy, but it was such a beautiful sweater. Definitely regret selling it. Now, when it came to the gloves, there was the Part A hero glove, the Part B hero glove, and then obviously the stunt gloves. There were gloves where you could swap out plastic blades for aluminium blades or aluminum blades. And it's just a bulky tank looking glove. I mean, he's got to go up against Jason. It's got to be heavy duty. Those blades, those big, thick ass machine blades are absolutely glorious to look at. The leather glove was apparently sourced from Canada because that's where they were doing most of the production in Canada. Like, it is an odd looking glove. It's a lot shorter of an armature, and like the pull string, I wouldn't even call it a pull string. It's just like a prop string that comes out from under the backplate that kind of just rests under there. It has no purpose whatsoever, but it's still there. At this point in time, makeup technology had evolved a lot. So Robert was able to have a one-piece hood that could go over his head. It was lined with a mesh, like a power mesh, embedded into the foam latex, as opposed to a lot more pieces being glued on at the same time. He could just pull a hood over his head, then it'd apply the brow, the nose, the lips, the upper lip, the ears, and stuff like that, which cut down on the application time. Overall, I think this is a very fitting return to the character of Freddy Krueger, and Robert just absolutely relished being in that film. He was definitely back in full form once again as Freddy Krueger. But unfortunately, that would be the last time we would see Robert Englund on screen in a live action performance as Freddy Krueger. For now, anyway. As I said in the beginning, I had some honorable mentions where Robert would come back in the Goldbergs. He also had his appearances at cons in the Robert Kurtzman makeup that he also utilized that makeup for the Goldbergs. But for now, Robert has not made a return in terms of live action. I really hope he does one more. I just hope maybe, just maybe, they do a direct sequel or something like that. Robert comes back, Heather comes back. Christ, can you imagine if they got Johnny Depp back as Glenn? I'd lose my shit. So after Freddy vs. Jason, a couple of years had passed. 2009, they started filming the remake, the Platinum Dunes Nightmare on Elm Street remake, where they cast Academy Award nominee Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy Krueger. Now, this is a very different look. This is a massive departure in terms of the makeup for Freddy Krueger. Makeup artist Andrew Clement wanted something a lot more realistic to an actual burn victim, and I can safely say they did exactly that. But unfortunately, by doing that, you lose the performance of a wonderful actor who did a damn good job as Freddy, given the material that was handed to him in terms of a script and a director. By having such a restrictive makeup, you lose the performance. You lose that animated appearance that Freddy would have at times. Robert was so expressive with that makeup. He could act the shit out of that makeup. You either act with the makeup or the makeup is going to override you. And in this case, it unfortunately overrid Jackie Earle Haley. Again, he's such a phenomenal actor. I feel it was just such wasted potential. And I appreciate the work that had gone into this makeup. They were utilizing silicone this time around as opposed to foam latex. Heavy contact lenses. It also restricted the way he spoke. I'm not a big fan of the voice. It's very odd and very otherworldly to me. The fedora is pretty stock standard. The sweater this time around is very reminiscent of the Freddy vs. Jason sweater, just a lot more streamlined, a lot more leaner, but the colors are a bit more vibrant than the darker red and green from the Freddy vs. Jason sweater. Now, when it comes to the glove, this is a brand new design for the 2010 remake. I really dig this glove. It's meaty, it's chunky, it's heavy duty. It was built by prop builder Joe D. Mack. In some photos you can see here of him assembling one of the gloves. There are an array of gloves built that have now been auctioned off, and you can see some nice close-ups of them. It has a suede hide glove going on here, very plain looking, but it has a cuff closure with a hinge on it. You've also got the stalls that run from the hinge all the way up to the fingertips with machined copper caps, those thick-ass blades that have been welded on this time around as opposed to brazing or soldering. You can see all that thick, chunky welding going on there. Overall, this look casts a great silhouette of Freddy Krueger. Again, I think it was just such wasted potential with what you had in terms of Jackie Earle Haley. It's a cool design, but at the same time, kind of forgettable, like the Part 5 makeup. And there you go, ghouls and ghoulettes. That is the evolution of Freddy Krueger throughout his live-action cinematic run. With that being said, let me know down below your favorite look of Freddy. For me, it's Part 1, but just Part 2 keeps nudging in now and then. It's so damn good. Robert looks so creepy, but overall, I love the way Part 1 Freddy was lit, or should I say lack of lighting. He was hidden in shadows most of the time. He barely said a word to me. That is evil Freddy right there. Guys, wherever you are in the world, please have yourselves an absolute cracker of a day. I hope you're well. Hope you're happy. Be merry, be silly. And until next time, ghouls and ghoulettes, please always remember, cosplayers do it best.